Let's make the enemy chase. So let's create a script and we have to attach that script to our enemy game object. So before we do that, I'm going to select this enemy game object in hierarchy. Let's move over to animator. We need to make transition from this enemy idle to enemy chase as well as enemy death. So let's make transition between them. So let's select this enemy idle. So we can select see slime enemy idle animation clip. We need to make transition to slam enemy chase. Why? Because once the player gets in attack range of this enemy, then this enemy should play this enemy chase animation clip instead of the idle. So that's why we're gonna make transition. So let's right click on enemy idle and make transition to enemy slime enemy chase, and let's select this transition, go over to inspector. We're gonna untick this as exit time because as soon as possible we need to play this enemy chase enemy animation clip. So that's why we just untick, and transition duration we're gonna choose 0. We don't want any delays, and let's scroll down. We need to choose a condition in which condition we want to play this slime enemy chase anime. So we're gonna set a condition for this or a parameter, and we're gonna set that parameter. To set that, in animator tab in the left side we can see parameters. So click on this plus icon, and for this now we're gonna choose a bool which can be true or false, and we're gonna call this one chase. And let's choose this chase parameter. So let's hit this plus icon in anime inspector, scroll down and hit this plus icon, and we're gonna choose chase is true. And we also need to get back to idle. So once the player game object far from our enemy game object means the player is not in attack range. So in that moment we need to place slime enemy idle animation clip instead of the chase one. So let's right click and make transition back to play as slime enemy idle animation clip, and let's select this transition and go over to inspector. We're gonna until this has exit time, and transition durations let's set it to 0. Scroll down and we're gonna choose slime enemy, basically this chase parameter to false by now, because we're gonna set it to false, and if it's false basically uncheck, it's just gonna play the ideal animation clip. And we also need to play this slime enemy death animation clip. Once the enemy loses all of his health, then this enemy game object should play this death animation clip no matter what state we are in. So that's why we're gonna make from any state. We can see this right over here. So let's right click on any state and make transition to enemy death. So let's right click, make transition, and let's select this transition. Let's go over to inspector, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna take this as exit time, and when exit time we're gonna choose 1, and big 1 basically means 100%. So we just want to play the 100% animation clip of this death one. And transition duration we're gonna choose 0, and we can see the preview if we just scroll down in the inspector. We have a preview right over here. So if I just click on this play button, we can see the animation is playing completely. So I'm gonna click this on one more time. We have the preview, so let's click to pause, and we need to choose a parameter for this as well. So we're gonna choose a trigger, and we will trigger through code out with code as well. To do so, let's go to parameter tab on one more time in animator. Let's click on this plus icon, and we're gonna choose a trigger, and let's call this trigger to something like death. Let's call it death, and we're gonna choose this trigger. So to do so, let's go to inspector, scroll down, and let's click on this plus icon. Instead of chase, we're gonna choose this death. So if we trigger this death parameter, it's gonna play this slime enemy death animation right away. And if we set this chase parameter to true, basically check, it's gonna play the enemy chase animation clip. Why? Because if we select this transition and go over to inspector, scroll down, we have chosen that condition as you can see. So if chase is true, we can see from this idle it's gonna move over to enemy chase. And if we select this back transition, we can see if we set this chase parameter to false, it's gonna play the slime idle animation clip right away because we have chosen that condition. So let's try to set this parameter manually. So I'm gonna click on this play button in the top and let's have a look. I'm gonna set this chase parameter to true, basically check basically means true. So if we set that, we're gonna see that this enemy just gonna play that animation clip. So if I just click on this button, we can see the enemy is playing the chase animation clip over again and again because we set this chase parameter to true, basically check. And we can select this transition. We have chosen that condition over here, we can see. But once I set this chase parameter to false, we can see slime enemy idle animation is now playing over again and again. And now if we trigger this death parameter, the death animation is playing, but the problem is that it's just playing over again and again, and we don't want to play this death animation clip over again and again, basically in loop we don't want. So what we have to do so, let's get out of play mode in the top. So just click on this play button one more time to get out, and let's go over to project tab, assets, and then animation. Basically go over to that folder where you created all of the animation. So we're gonna go over to animation, and animation we have it over here, and we have the animation clip over here. So we're gonna choose the death one, so we can see this death one. So select that and go over to inspector in the right. We can see loop time, so we don't want the death animation clip to be loop, so that's why we're gonna uncheck this loop time. And now the animation not gonna be loop right now. To do so, let's click on this play button before we play our game. I'm gonna choose the animator tab over here, and make sure you just select this as slime anime game object in your hierarchy. And after doing that, click on this play button in the top and have a look on this. So if I now just trigger this stat parameter, we can see it just played one more, just one, and it just stacking over there. Basically it just played one time only. So after playing the 100% animation clip of death, we need to destroy this enemy totally right there. So before we do, we also need to set this parameter. Basically if I just get out of play mode, we're setting this parameter manually. Instead of setting this manually, we need to set this depending upon if the player gets in attack range, then we're gonna have to play this slime enemy chase animation clip. Basically we need to set this chase parameter to true, and we do know once we set it to true, it's playing as slime enemy chase animation clip. And once we set this to back, basically uncheck, it's gonna play slime enemy idle animation clip right away. So we're gonna create a script for that. So let's create a script for that. To do so, let's go to project tab, then assets, then move to script folder. Basically create a script folder, just right clicking on assets, then create folder over here, and name that folder to something like scripts. I have it over here, so I'm gonna choose that folder. Let's right click there, create C# script, and name it to something like anime. I already have created right over I have, so I'm gonna select the slime anime game object in hierarchy, and let's select that script and drag it over to add component section. And now double click that script to open it up in Visual Studio. So by default we can see start and update function, and I don't need these two namespaces in the top, so we can remove that. Instead we need some things. So first thing, we need our player position. So if we select this player game object in hierarchy, then go over to inspector, then transform. So this transform is responsible for position, rotation, and scale. So we need our player transform, so just we can keep track of where player is, then we can just see if it's in attack range or not. So let's go to script. So we will make a public. So instead of making public, we're gonna make serialized field. Say make this square brackets and say serialized field, basically same as public. You can see the field underneath your if we select this slime enemy game object, you can see that field underneath your anime script right over here. But the problem with this serial face, you cannot access this field with another script. So if I just move over to this follow script, I cannot call that you can say I cannot access that variable, or you can say that transform. So I'm gonna go to anime script one more time. So this is the perfect thing to do, because we don't need anywhere our player position. That is transform we're looking for, which is you can say position, and we can call this one something like player, and control s to save your code and move over to Unity. So Unity just gonna take a little time, and what you have to do, so we're gonna see if that player field will appear just underneath our enemy script, which will be player. So what we have to do, we need to select this player and drag it right there. So we're gonna have the player reference or player position, and indeed we are able to see underneath our enemy script player, and it says none transform. So what we have to do, we need to select this player and drag it right there from hierarchy, make sure, and now we have player transform, or you can say player position. Now we just can keep track of where player is. Let's double click one more time to open it up, and to check in at if it's attack range or not, let's go to this update function. Update function we're gonna do inside update function, because update function runs every single frame, and we need to keep track the player position every single frame where player exactly is. And the player, if exact gets in attack range, then this player should play the chase animation clip, and it should chase our player game object. So let's go to script one more time, and over here what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a circle around this enemy, and if that circle collide with this player game object, or this player game object gets in that circle, then this enemy just gonna chase our player game object. So let's go to a script, and in order to do, we're gonna use this physics 2d dot overlap circle, and this function right over here, it's gonna create a circle around our enemy position. And as a first argument, it's gonna take the position from where you want to create the circle. So we want to create the circle center of our enemy position. So basically we have to pass this transform, then position means the current position of enemy, or you can say the center position of enemy. So as a first argument, we're gonna pass transform dot position, means the current position or the center position of enemy. And the second thing, it's gonna take the radius. So we can make it over here. So let's make a variable for that as well. So we will go to top of our class, and we're gonna make another serialized field, and that will be float, and we can call this one something like attack radius, and by default I'm gonna set it to something like 1f. So we made this serialized field, we able to see under, we're gonna able to see underneath enemy script, but we cannot access this field with another script. So let me explain. So if I just move to this follow script something like that, and over here some in the start function, if I use find object of type, and into arrows we have to pass the script name. The script is enemy, and make this first bracket dot, and let's try to access this attack radius parameter, or this player, let's try to access this player. So if I just move to follow script dot player, we cannot able to see right over here, as you can see. So that is the cool thing of making a serialized field. Basically you cannot able to access through another script, but you will able to see underneath your enemy script, or in the inspector you're gonna able to see it. So that is the cool thing about just making that field serialized. So I'm gonna make it comment, so it's not gonna interrupt our code. Let's go to enemy script one more time, and as a second argument we're gonna pass this attack radius. So let's pass attack radius, and the third thing, it's gonna take the layer mask, or basically you can say something which game object you want to target. So in my case I want to target our player game object, so we need to assign our player as a player layer. So let's create a layer mask for that. So we gonna also make a serialized field make this square bracket serialize field, and we're gonna call that will be layer mask. A layer mask, basically we need to assign our player as a player layer. Before we do, we're gonna type something like target, let's call it something target layer, and close that up with semicolon, and we're gonna pass right over here target layer and close that up with semicolon. So target layer, we're gonna choose our player, and before we choose our player, we need to assign our player as a player layer. To do so, we're gonna go over to our script, and let's select this player game object in your hierarchy. So select the player game object in your hierarchy, then go over to inspector. In the right section you can see layer and it says default, so just click there and click on add layer, and we're gonna add a layer something like player, so let's call this one player. And after doing that, go over to that game object one more time, which is in our case player, then go over to inspector and layer it says default, so just click there and we're gonna assign player. Now we assigned this player as a player layer, so now go to script, and as a target layer we're gonna choose player layer, and control S to save your code, and now move over to unity because we need to assign those variables. So we need to move over to our slime enemy game object, and underneath our enemy script we're gonna choose as a target layer player. So and we do know we assign it our player as a player layer. So now let's select this slime enemy game object in hierarchy, go over to inspector, then enemy script. We can see attack radius, by default we have chosen 1, so we're gonna leave it with 1 for now. And target layer, it says nothing, so just click there and we're gonna choose player. So the circle we're gonna create, it's only gonna check for this player game object right now. And attack radius, I'm gonna increase something like 10, sorry, 10. And now let's go to script one more time, and this function right over here, it can be true or false depending upon if the circle is really collided with that player game object or not. So we just created the circle, and if that circle collide with this player game object, so this function right over here gonna give us a true value, else it's gonna give us a false value. So let's store the result into a variable, so we're gonna store it into a collider 2D because we're gonna that gonna collide with this player game object. So that's why we have to store this result into a collider 2D, or you can just make a bool parameter as well, but I'm gonna do it something like collider 2D, and we have to name the parameter, so we can call this one hit info, and let's set equal to this. So this hit info right over here can be true or false depending upon if the circle is really colliding with its player game object or not. That if it's, then this hitful info just gonna be true right away, else it's gonna be false, because this function just gonna be true or false, and we're storing that into this hit info parameter. And now we're gonna go to down and we will check if hit info equals to true. If that is the case, make some curly brackets. So if hit info is true, equals to true, or you can just leave like this, it's also means true. So basically we're checking if the circle is really colliding. Now it's colliding, as you can see. If hit info is true, means the circle is really colliding with this player game object. Now what we have to do, we need to chase our player game object. So before we do that, so let's chase our player game object. And else we're gonna type else, basically else we don't want to, so in order to chase our this, you can say this player game object, we need to use this vector2 dot move towards. So before we do, we're gonna set the current position, so we will pass transform dot position, basically means current position of our enemy, and we will set equal to vector2 dot move towards. And this function right over here gonna take current position and the position where you want to go, and the third argument, it's gonna take the speed, how much speed you want to go to that point. So we have to specify as well. So current position, we're gonna pass transform dot position, means the current position, and the target position is our player. And we have the player reference, we do know, basically player transform, or you can say player position. So let's pass player dot position. And the third thing, it's gonna take the speed. So let's make a variable for that as well. So let's make a serialized field. So serialized field, and that will be float, and we can call this one something like chase speed. So let's call this one chase speed, and by default I'm gonna set it to something like 3f or 3 unit. So let's pass chase speed, and we're gonna multiply with this time dot delta time to make frame rate independent or constant. So let's multiply time dot delta time, and close that off with semicolon. So we're setting the current position of our enemy equal to the target position where we want to go with this much of speed, and we want to go to our player position, or simply we want to chase our player position. So that's why we pass player dot position. And control S to save your code. And now move over to Unity, and let's have a look. And now if we just hit this play button, but the problem is that we cannot able to see the circle. So we also want just also want to see the circle. In order to see, we have to use another function or to draw the circle. To do so, we need to move over to our script, and we're gonna go do it somewhere around here. You can do it anywhere you like. So that function is on draw gizmo selected. Make sure you just typing as I did right over here, else it's not gonna call, because this is Unity callback function, and it's gonna do the automatic thing. So we don't need to call, it's gonna call by Unity automatically. And this function just gonna draw what we want to draw, and we want to draw the circle around this enemy position, so we can see the attack radius. And in order to draw, we have to use this gizmos dot draw where sphere, and it's gonna take the position from where you want to draw. So we're gonna pass transform dot position, means the current position of our enemy or the center position. And second thing, it's gonna take the radius. So let's pass comma attack radius, and close that off with semicolon. And you can also choose the color you want to draw with. So I'm gonna choose, so before we draw, we're gonna set the color. So gizmos dot color, it's totally up to you. If you want to choose a color, then you can do this, or else you can just leave it. So gizmos dot color, I'm gonna set equal to color dot something like red, and close that up with semicolon. Control S to save your code. And now let's move over to Unity. Now this enemy game object should chase our player game object right away. So just wait, and we can see the circle right now, and it's too much I guess too much large. So let's make a little bit small. So I'm gonna move over to this anime script. Let's shrink down this attack radius somewhere. This much would be pretty nice. And now after doing that, let's click on this play button in the top by now, and have a look on it. So if we just get inside of this circle, we can see indeed enemy is just chasing our player game object, and it's chasing our player game object, and it's not. Whenever we get inside of this circle, you can say at that point it's just chasing, but once we are outside of the circle, enemy just stops right there. We also need to play, but once we get closer, we can see enemy just pushing our player game object. So we need to stop doing so at some point. So once we something like the position between our player and this enemy, if it's something too much close, then we want to stop this enemy right there. We need to stop chasing our player game object. So that is the thing. To do so, we're gonna go over to script one more time, and so we're chasing right over here. So before we chase, we're gonna take some distance between them. So what we will do, we're gonna create a retrieve distance. to check the distance between them, we're gonna check if vector 2. So we're doing 8 info, basically means this inside the player is inside this circle now, and we also checking if we are inside and the distance between, if it's too much less, then we need to stop chasing, else if it's not, then we need to chase. So we're gonna chase we're gonna check if vector 2. So vector 2 distance right over here, it's gonna take two position and it will compare between them. So first position we're gonna pass our own, which is transform dot position, and the second position we will pass our player position. So we will pass player dot position, and we're gonna check if the distance between them, if it's lesser than or equal to some kind smaller number, and make some curly brackets. Is smaller, let's check for smaller. At that moment we're gonna chase, else will not. So we're gonna put this line of code. So control X for cut and control V for base. So we're checking if the distance, sorry, it's not lesser than, basically greater than, something like we can check for 2f 2 unit. So, let's make a variable for that, this one as well. So let's go to top right over here, let's make a serialized field that will be float as well, and we can call this one retrieve retrieve distance. I'm really sorry if I'm just misspelling this one, I'm really sorry. Retrieve, I guess let's leave it retrieve distance, I'm gonna set by default 2f, and let's replace this with retrieve distance, retrieve, which is by default we set 2. So we're checking if the distance between our enemy and the player, if it's greater than retrieve distance, at that moment we can see we just chasing our player game object. And if the distance between is not greater than retrieve distance, it means the player and the enemy is too much close now. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna something else. So else, if the distance between enemy and player, if it's too much close, at that moment enemy should attack on our player game object, you can say. So that's why we're gonna type, for now let's type print, so debug.log, we're gonna print something like attack on player, and close that off with semicolon. Control S to save your code. So what we're doing, firstly we're checking if the enemy sorry player is inside the circle or not. If it's, then, and after that we checking if it's, then we're checking our enemy and the player position, if it's greater than retrieve distance, means some smaller number, means the player and player is not too much close yet to our enemy game object. So what we're doing, we're just chasing our playing, we're setting our enemy position, current position equal to our target position where we want to go. And if the distance between is not greater than retrieve distance, means our player and enemy, if not is some smaller number, now you can say player is too much close or the enemy is too much close. So what we're doing, we're just printing out message in the console says attack on player, as you can see. I hope you get the idea. So control S to save your code and move over to Unity. Sorry, move over to Unity. Control S to save your code, and I'm gonna clear the console. And now if I just if we select this slime enemy game object in hierarchy and go over to inspector, click on this enemy script, it just expand, and let's click on this play button to play our game and have a look on it. Just wait for to compile, and so as you can see enemy stops right there. So basically the distance between our player and enemy is not greater than retrieve distance, means that our enemy and player is too much close or not greater than retrieve distance. At that moment what we're doing, we can see in the console we're just printing out message says attack on player. But the problem is that once we are not in the distance between is greater than retrieve distance, mean enemy still you can say far from our player game object. So what we have to do, sorry, what this play enemy game object need to do, it's need to play the what chase animation clip. As you can see, it's just playing idle animation clip over again and again. We need to stop doing, instead we need to play that you can say chase animation clip. So I'm gonna get out of play mode, and to play the chase animation clip, so if I select the slam enemy game object in hierarchy and move over to animator, so I'm gonna close the animator, we're getting a problem. So if I just right click and close tab, and to get the animator tab once more, what you have to do, you need to go to window in the top, scroll down, says animation, and we can see the animator right over here. So I'm gonna click that to get it. Let's drag it down and select this parameter right over here. So we need to set this test parameter to true, and we do know once we set this to true, it's gonna play the slime at enemy chase animation clip right away. And once we set back this to false, this chase enemy, it's gonna play the ideal animation clip. So once we created this animation clip, we do know this animator component just gets added up, and this animator component is responsible for playing our animation as well as switching them. So we need a reference of this animator component, then we can just do that. Basically we gonna set this by this animator component reference, or this animator, we're gonna set this chase parameter as well as the depth one. We will look in future tutorial of death one. For now we will take a look on this chase. So let's open up the anime script one more time. So I'm gonna move over to anime script. So we're chasing right over here, as you can see we're chasing right over here. So let's get the reference firstly. So I'm gonna make a serialized field. Instead of making serialized field or something like that, I'm gonna make a private field. I'm gonna explain. So I'm gonna do it somewhere around here, private, so we cannot able to see, and that is a animator, and we can call it something like animator, and close that up with semicolon. And we will move over to this start function, and we do know that start function get called when the game start. So in the start of the game, what I want to do, I want to grab the animator reference. Animator, we made this field private, so we cannot able to see underneath our enemy script. So we need to still we need to get this reference of this animator, so then we can switch up the animation. So in order to get the animator reference, what we have to do, we're gonna use this dot get component, and this dot get component, and into arrows we need to pass the component name, or what component we're looking for. In our case we're looking for our animator, so that's why we need to pass this and make this first bracket and close that with semicolon. And what we're gonna do now, we're gonna take this animator component, we're gonna store it into this animator. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna set equal to animator equal to this. So let me explain what I have done over here. So basically we just taking by this dot get component right over here. This line of code, it just gets the component what we're looking for. So in our case this animator, so we just taking this animator component, and we storing this animator component into this animator variable, or in this animator, as you can see. So we just directly set equal to this dot get component animator. Basically we taking this animator component, and then we storing that animator component into this animator variable. We can see right over here animator equal to this. Now we have the animator reference, or you can say this animator component reference or the link, and we are ready to switch up our animation clip by now. To do so, let's go to script now. So we're chasing right over here, so let's go there, and to chase we're gonna do animator dot set bool, and make this first. So why we using, so we moving over to animator, and we using this set bool function, because if we move to a unity, and we can see that in animator component this chase is a bool parameter. So that's why we type over here set bool, and in quotation, so as a first argument in quotation, it's gonna take the parameter name. So the parameter name we can see is chase, so we need to make the same spelling, which is chase. So we're gonna pass chase a comma, and we have to set the value. So we're gonna set it to true, and close that up with some animator. So we just going over to this animator, and then we just we just setting this chase parameter to true, as you can see right over here. We just setting to true, and we also need to set this chase parameter to false when once the enemy is outside, sorry, once the player game object is outside of the range of this enemy game object. At that moment we need to set, so we doing over here else means the enemy is not, sorry, player game object is not inside of the circle of this enemy, or you can say it's not in attack range. So we're gonna go over to animator now, animator, and we're gonna use this set bool one more time. And as a first argument it's gonna take the parameter name, so we're gonna pass data js, and the second thing it's gonna take the value, so we're gonna set it equal to sorry, we're gonna set it to false and close that up with some semicolon. Control s to save your code, and now move over to unity, and we should able to see that now once we get in attack range or inside of circle of this enemy game object, enemy just gonna play the chase animation clip right away. To see that, let's click on this play button in the top. By now we have the animator component reference, and by that animator component reference we're just setting this chase parameter. So let's have a look. It's playing ideal animation clip now, and if I select this slime enemy game object in hierarchy, we can see the circle. Let's get inside of that circle, so we can see enemy is now playing the chasing animation clip. And once we get outside of that circle, we can see enemy is now playing the ideal animation clip over again and again. And once we get inside, it's playing that over again and again. And we also need to play a something like attack animation clip, something like that, so our enemy just gonna attack on our player game object. For now we can leave this, and I hope you get the idea that how you can just make this. And now enemy just playing the chasing, sorry, ideal animation clip over again and again. So I'm gonna get out of play mode. I hope you get the idea that how you can make your enemy to chase your player game object once the player game object inside attack range of this enemy game object. And make sure you just go to top left file and then click on save, so whatever you have done so far in your project, it's gonna be saved right away. Or you can just press down Control S to save your project. So I'm gonna hit Control S on my keyboard to save my project. So lastly, thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in the next tutorial.